celebrity sightings, and UFO sightings. But I repeat myself.
A 1, 2, 3, 4.
Greetings and welcome to another episode of A Very Odd Caster. We lost one of the NFL greats a few days ago, the great Jim Brown of the Cleveland Browns. Brown was obviously a very complex character. Much has been written about him, and much more will be in the future. Of course, if you've seen any of the old films of Jim Brown running the football, you could easily conclude that he was the greatest running back in the history of the NFL. With all due apologies to the other greats, such as Bernie Sanders. That's right, kids. Bernie Sanders, before he was a 95-year-old independent senator that's never authored a meaningful piece of legislation in his life, he was a great running back in the NFL. Shit. I'm a little sleepy, all right? Barry Sanders is who I was referring to, the great Detroit Lions running back, who I think was the only one even close to Jim Brown as a running back. But even Barry Sanders didn't have the power that Jim Brown had. Jim Brown had it all. I would say that Bo Jackson could have been Jim Brown's equal had he stayed healthy, but also focused on football. He was the only other one who really had that combination of power and breakaway speed. Herschel Walker was good too, but now Herschel Walker is a failed politician. So Jim Brown was the total package as far as an athlete goes. And I didn't realize that he was like great in every sport. He was a pitcher, I think, in baseball, and like was the best pitcher on his team. He was one of the best basketball players. I think he played at Syracuse. I think he played 3 or 4 sports at Syracuse. He was supposedly one of the greatest lacrosse players ever. And I don't know a thing about lacrosse, but I do remember seeing that. But he was not just good at football and lacrosse, apparently basketball, baseball, track. He ran track. The guy was a freak as an athlete, which made his evolution over the years very interesting because, of course, he was one of the great activists during the 60s and beyond, did a great deal for the black community. But of course, there was this other side to Brown that wasn't so flattering. He had been arrested several times for domestic violence related things. He apparently had a pretty nasty temper and, took it out on women. So that is a dark stain on his legacy. So he's a very complex guy. And one thing about Brown's off-the-field transgressions as it pertains to violence, and particularly violence against women, he was sort of the warm-up act for O.J. Simpson, ironically. I remember as a kid the year O.J. Simpson emerged as the greatest running back in the league, and he was chasing down Jim Brown's single-season rushing record, and he did it, and in 14 games too, which was the same as Jim Brown. O.J. got 2,000 yards. But of course, O.J. is remembered for something else, as we all know. And I remember Jim Brown was quoted when O.J. got arrested, said something to the effect that, well, everyone thought he was such a nice guy, but I knew he wasn't such a nice guy, or something like that. And I remember thinking, it's kind of ironic that Jim Brown's commenting on this this violent crime against a woman. But nonetheless, Brown did many great things. The Ali Summit, the Cleveland Summit, where he brought together many of the great athletes, black athletes at the time, to meet with Ali, who had just announced he was not going to enlist in the army, he wasn't going to Vietnam, citing his religious beliefs for not going to the war. And that, of course, ignited a firestorm. And the purpose of that summit was to basically sort of interrogate Ali, because a lot of these guys, Jim Brown included, served in the military. And some of these guys were in like World War II and whatnot. So they wanted to know, hey, what's up with you, champ? And so they had kind of a intense back and forth in this meeting, but they came out of it believing that Ali was genuine. So it is what it is, but certainly was a very controversial moment in the country's history as well as sports history. So some of Jim Brown's exploits on the field, he's still in the top, I don't know what he is, all-time leading rusher. He only played 9 seasons. He quit when he was 29. So all these other guys that passed him played well beyond Jim Brown's time, with the exception of Bernie Sanders. Barry Sanders, I don't think, played much longer than Jim Brown, if at all. Barry Sanders was really good, by the way. And so is Bernie. Just trying to envision Bernie Sanders carrying the football. Give me the ball! God. Anyway. So O.J. broke Jim Brown's single-season rushing record. I think it was 1973, about 10 years after Jim Brown had rushed for like 1,863 yards, which was the record. And then 10 years later, O.J. broke it, and he rushed for just over 2,000 yards. That record has since been broken. Of course, now they play, 30 games during the season or whatever it is. But the other guy that was chasing Jim Brown's career record and eventually passed that was none other than the late, great Franco Harris, who passed very suddenly not too long ago. I actually saw Franco Harris in the airport. It was the Pittsburgh airport. Who would have thunk it? Years ago. And Franco eventually passed Jim Brown. And Franco is certainly great and wore number 32 and was powerful like Jim Brown and was fast, but not as powerful and not as fast. And let's face it, he played for the Steelers, so how good could he have been? Yes, I'm from Cleveland, all right? So this sort of segues into another topic that I was thinking about, and that is something that we've all had, or the vast majority of us have had at one point or another. These brushes with fame, basically where you bump into or come across famous people, famous public figures out somewhere. And this, I'm not talking about the, going to a concert. Oh, I was in the same room as Paul McCartney. Oh, really? Yeah, I saw him at the Omni in Atlanta. No, I don't mean that. I'm talking about random encounters. We've all had them. And I just mentioned Franco Harris. I had many random encounters with pro athletes over the years. Back in the days of my early 20s, when I was hitting the town, I would see the Browns guys out all the time. I remember seeing Bernie Kosar out entertaining a young lady for dinner sometime. I saw all those Browns guys. Hanford Dixon, I saw him everywhere before he calmed down. Tom Cousineau, saw him in the bank that I worked at. He was looking at me. I saw Dikembe Mutombo, who is 7'2". There was this CDC Foundation event, and Dikembe Mutombo was there. And I shook his hand, and it was like shaking the hands of a grizzly bear. I just can't believe the dude's height. He had to bend way over just so he wouldn't hit his head on the ceiling. He was this Dikembe Mutombo. Yeah. The airport is always a place where you come across some of these public figures. I saw Charles Barkley in the Atlanta airport way back when. It was when he was playing still, and he was picking up his luggage in the baggage claim, and I had just picked mine up. I'm like, damn, that's Charles Barkley. I want to say he was with either his mother and his wife. It was some combination like that. And it looked like Charles was giving his mom a bit of lip service. I can't imagine that happening. And then in the Atlanta days, there was several popular night spots. And I used to see some of the Atlanta athletes, Dominique Wilkins. What was his name? Oh, his nickname was the Human Highlight Film. He was a dunker. Kind of one-dimensional, though. But boy, could he score. And then, at one of these Atlanta nightclubs, I saw none other than Brian Bosworth. Does anyone remember Brian Bosworth? He was one of the greatest self-promoters to ever come out of college football. The Boz. He was went to Oklahoma, and I don't know if I think he was from Texas or down that way, Oklahoma or something. And he really billed himself as the greatest linebacker to ever come out of college. And of course, the thing he's most remembered for on the football field is when Bo Jackson trucked him at the goal line, just flattened him. That was nice. But I saw him, Bosworth, at some club. He was walking around looking mean, and I wouldn't mess with him, But he's vanished into obscurity because he never did crap in the NFL, contrary to his own self-promotions. I think the first time I saw a celebrity out in public was in New York City, the very first time I went to New York. Of course, that's the place to see people. I've seen many people there. But me and my buds were walking down the street, I don't know if it was 42nd Street, but it was somewhere in that area. And we're going from crosswalk to crosswalk, and we were a bit out of our skulls, if you know what I mean. And I kind of became aware of this really tall guy walking along next to us, and he looked wasted. He was like, and his walking like this, and he was dressed all like this, all in black. And he looked like he was, I don't know, 6'6" or something like that. And I started being aware of him, like, who's this drunk, you know? And then we come up to the next crosswalk, and he steps up right next to me. I look up at him, I'm like, it's freaking Johnny Cash. Would have been 1983. So Johnny was still in his heavy usage period. But then again, so was I.
I'd like to sing a song that my daddy sung to me when I was a boy. And before that, his daddy sung it to him too. And someday, when I reproduce, I'm gonna sing it to my boy as well. This song's called Hitler, the Little Train Conductor. And it goes something like this. Well, I heard that whistle blowing as the train pulled round the bend. That big old freighter kept chugging along, and I heard that whistle blow again. The train pulled in the station, and it came to a screeching halt. And then the little conductor climbed on out and said, "Jawohl, you look like Hitler. You look like Hitler." And he said, "Eat-eyed, with the eye, eat-eyed, with the eye, even giving lip blood, with the eye, with the eye, with the eye." And I said, "Pardon me." Well, I admit I had second thoughts about riding on that train. No one likes to travel with a man who's gone completely insane, headed south of Nashville on that big old Dixie line. And I was trying to figure out what was going on inside that conductor's mind. He looked like Hitler. He looked like Hitler. And he said, "Eat-eyed, with the eye, eat-eyed, with the eye, even giving lip blood, third right, what could I eat? With the eye." I said, "Pardon me." Well, I closed my eyes in horror and I prayed that ride would end. I longed to hear the whistle as the train pulled in the station again. Next time I'll take a Greyhound or a Continental jet. That look on the little conductor's face is one I won't forget. He looked like Hitler. He looked like Hitler. And he said, "Eat-eyed, with the eye, eat-eyed, with the eye, Colonel Schultz, Olga Corbett, eat-eyed, with the eye, with the eye." I said, "Pardon me." Hitler, the little train conductor.
I don't think I was anywhere near what Johnny Cash was as far as a partier. Anyhow, so I saw Johnny Cash. In New York, I've seen a few people. Bjorn Borg, remember the tennis champion, the Wimbledon guy? I guess he was Swedish or something. You know, they have all those silent consonants in their names. Saw him somewhere, I think it was Greenwich Village, walking down, holding hands with some chick. Saw Frank Thomas, the Hall of Fame baseball player, and Bo Jackson's teammate, by the way. He was out and about, I think it was wintertime, because I thought he had this big fur coat on. He's a huge dude, Frank Thomas. He was with some lady. Well, I saw Cousin Eddie himself in a New York cafe. I was walking down the sidewalk and I glanced up and I saw these two guys kind of having a business meeting. I saw them in the window. I look and there's Cousin Eddie, Randy Quaid. You know, this was before he was on the lam for whatever, I forget, fraud or something. Anyhow, I also saw Sigourney Weaver out holding hands with her beau at night. That was kind of in her big heyday, Aliens and Ghostbusters and all that stuff. A tall lady she is. That's Sigourney Weaver. Saw Norm from Cheers, George Wendt. I was in this little bar having a drink that was in the theater district, off Broadway or near Broadway or something. And it was fairly late. There was some kind of a cast party going on there, of some show. And Norm was bouncing around the bar, really high-strung and partying and whatnot. I'm like, hey, there's Norm, you know, in a bar. Imagine that, you know. But yeah, I saw him. And my last but not least, my New York experiences. We were walking down. This was years and years ago, and allegedly this big limo came cruising through, and everyone starts yelling out, "Hey, that's Donald Trump!" Way before he became the Donald Trump we know and love. Yeah, this was way before he was into politics. So that was back when he still fit in with all the glitterati. Who else have I seen? Oh, in D.C., I went to a congressional hearing once. I saw Ted Kennedy. His face was redder than mine is now, and I was out in the sun all day yesterday. And Arlen Specter was in that hearing, too. Boy, that guy was a grump. And one time in D.C., I'm walking down this dark street late at night, and I got approached by none other than Tony Fauci. He said, "Psst, hey kid, you want to buy a vaccine?" No, that isn't what happened. Wouldn't shock me though. My last or most recent encounter with a public figure was not long ago, just a couple weeks ago. I jumped on a plane heading to Cleveland, and I was struggling with my carry-on, and I was conversing with the flight attendant, and I looked, and this guy is sitting near the front. It's a smaller plane, not a prop plane, but kind of the neck size up. And I look at him, and I'm like, I know that fucker. And I'm like, shit. Speaking of Trump, it was Trump's Attorney General, Bill Barr. He had this cold, glassy stare. And I'm like, I'm glad I'm not sitting next to him. So I guess Bill was headed to Cleveland to do a book signing or some shit like that. Anyhow, But it makes traveling a little more interesting when you bump into these people that you see, right? Never seen the wizard from The Wizard of Oz, though. He's always like hanging out behind the curtain. So, on that note, let's dance!
Black Friday girl.
Try it all on, I want it,
Black Friday girl.
baby, dropping some dough. Stop, 'cause I'll never go back.
We hadn't heard from the Dancing Panda in a while, so. Okay. So we are now coming down to the end of the conference finals in the NBA. And both conferences have had duds of series. Denver's beating LA 3-0, and they play tonight. And last night, Miami dismantled Boston, and now they're leading 3-0. And there's no way Boston's going to win Game 4. They're done. They quit. They quit on their coach. They quit on each other. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in Boston because their team's been together a long time. Reached the finals last year, had a 2-1 lead in that series, and then the Warriors caught fire and won 3 straight. And Boston has just looked not right all year. They play great in stretches, but no consistency. And in every series this playoff season, they've been on the ropes a little bit. I mean, Atlanta didn't really have them on the ropes, but Atlanta gave them a tough battle, and that shouldn't have happened. Philly had Boston beat, but of course Philly has their own problems. So Miami, who is really just playing out of this world, over their heads, I might add. Miami's destroying Boston, just destroying them. They're gonna sweep that series. Denver and LA tonight are in LA. I guess it's possible that LA could squeeze out a victory, but it's inevitable that Denver's going to win that series. But I kind of think they're going to get swept. I think LA is going to lose tonight, and I think the reason is that LeBron is checked out. You saw it at the end of Game 3. We walked off the court to the locker room, and the game was still going on. Typical LeBron move, you know. Even at age 38, he's still doing that stuff that, you know, kids do at age 9. So it's going to be Denver and Miami. And I have mixed feelings about that one because I like the Joker. He's a freak. And that Murray's really good. Jamal Murray. Boy, can he shoot the ball. But boy, Miami, you know, you just like that underdog club, right? Jimmy Butler is a freak. He just, you know, one of the best competitors in the league. So I don't really have a prediction on that one. But I think the Lakers and the Celtics are about to go down in flames. And too bad, because I don't particularly care for either of those two teams. So if you'd like to share with me any encounters you've had with famous people, public figures, whatnot, in random situations, please write to veryoncaster@gmail.com. That's veryoncaster@gmail.com. So it's about time to sign off for this Memorial Day weekend, but I do want to point out, you know, last week's program, we had a lot of fun with doing Mystery Science Theater, or as I called it, Mystery Government Training Film Theater, with an Army training film that was produced in 1970, which was really bad. But I just want to say thank you to the men and women who have served as we look forward to this great Memorial Day weekend and the unofficial kickoff to summer. So have a great weekend and see you around the corner.